Okay, so my name is Jacob Schultz. I am a Master's of Social Work student at Grand Valley State University, and for my six Social Work 640 class, my Capstone class, I had to do a community project. I decided to give a refugee presentation to some college students, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And my community partner for this project was Samaritas. So, as I mentioned, the Samaritas was the community partner for my project. So, Samaritas is a nonprofit organization that provides several services. They include foster care, affordable living, helping refugees, building communities, and behavioral health services. Presentation specifically focused on refugees, given that I do an internship helping refugees. So the identified needs slash gaps was educating others about refugees, along with trying to get more volunteers to help with Samaritas' refugee program, which is titled New American Services. These needs were discussed in collaboration with Samaritas after some of the programs suffered serious cuts under this since the start of the second Trump administration. So, one of the actions of the Trump administration that prompted a need for this presentation was an signing of an executive order by President Trump on his first day of his second term that suspended refugee resettlement for at least 90 days. He also signed an executive order that cut off the funds for reception and placement programs throughout the United States, including Samaritas. The Trump administration also later cut off the funds for the matching grant program. Cuts to these programs have severely limited Samaritas' ability to help refugees. Discussion emerged with Samaritas and how I could help to educate the public about refugee challenges that they face. So after a discussion with Samaritas, it was decided that I would do a presentation to a college class. The next challenge was trying to find a college class that would be willing to listen to my presentation. Reaching out to several universities in the Grand Rapids area, some outside of the Grand Rapids areas. I heard back from Cornerstone University. They have a sociology class called Social Problems that meets on Thursday evenings during the winter 2025 semester from 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. I had contact with the professor who agreed to allow me to present to the class on Thursday, March 27th, 2025, during the week in which immigration was the topic of the week, so it was a natural fit for this presentation. Oh, while preparing for this presentation, I looked at various literature about refugees. It, it informed me about some of the challenges that refugees have, along with the ways they've been discriminated. And it also informed me about the differences of between a refugee, immigrant, and asylum seeker, the application process of a refugee, some facts about how many refugees are being taken into the United States, and reasons to help refugees. My internship helped to inform me about the programs a refugee is enrolled in after entering the United States, whether they be resettlement or post-resettlement. So the grand challenge my presentation looked to address was achieving equal opportunity and justice. So my project will look to give refugees an equal chance to make a life for themselves here in the United States at the same level that non-refugees. Bringing more awareness to the challenges that refugees face will help others to become more empathetic towards them, increasing the possibility that they will receive equal opportunities here in the United States. Some examples of how refugees could possibly receive more equal opportunities here in the United States are in regards to employment and education. So the presentation that I did at Cornerstone University was a PowerPoint presentation. So my PowerPoint presentation started off by having the students take a pre-survey to ask them some questions about their comfort level with various topics regarding refugees, which I will discuss more in a little bit. I then had the students engage in an activity, asking them to discuss what they believe are the differences between a refugee, immigrant, and asylum seeker. I then asked the students to share their thoughts about these differences. I then shared my slides on what these differences are. I also shared the definition of what a migrant is and an undocumented immigrant is. I then also discussed what the application process for a refugee was. I mentioned that after the application process is complete, a refugee is then assigned to a resettlement agency. Afterwards, a refugee may undergo a cultural orientation that will help them prepare for their journey to the United States. They are then admitted to the United States and where their identity is verified. I stated that a refugee, after arriving in the area they will be staying in the United States, are greeted at the airport by the reception and placement caseworker. I then discussed some of the differences that they may receive, which can include enrolling in ELS or English as a Second Language class and registering children's in school. In addition to services that they can receive through the reception and placement program, a client is also enrolled in the matching grant program, which provides case management, employment skill training, and help with looking for a job and financial assistance. I also discussed some of the post-resettlement programs a client might run. Some examples of post-resettlement programs include ICM or intensive case management, and DLL or digital learning, uh, digital literacy learning program. The length of some of these programs vary, but they can be up to 5 years after a refugee enters the United States. I also discussed some of the challenges a refugee might face. They can include finding housing, education, employment, having access to mental health services, and transportation. I also discussed how refugees can oftentimes face the threat of violence and be exploited through human trafficking. I then discussed how it can be difficult for refugees to go to college due to high costs. I also discussed ways in which refugees can be discriminated against. Some examples include being suspected of engaging in illegal activities, lack of acceptance of religion, and employers may be being hesitant to hire someone with a lack of English proficiency. I also provided some facts regarding the number of refugees that came to the United States from certain countries, like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan, and Syria, along with the commitment. I also mentioned that how there was a commitment from former President Joe Biden to allow for a certain number of refugees from Ukraine to enter the United States. I also discussed some reasons that refugees should be helped. I also had the class engage in conversations about ideas they have in terms of how they believe refugees should be helped and shared them with me. I did show a slide about some ways one can help refugees. I ended the presentation by showing some information about how to volunteer at Samaritas if the college students wanted to. I also listed some videos and readings for the students if they wanted to look at them later, along with my references. I also took some questions the professors and students had for me. Some of those questions include about information about what I do in my internship, along with questions about how we provide housing for our clients. So the immediate direct impact was an increase in knowledge on refugees. So the pre and post surveys I conducted show an increase in the number of students who stated that they had either a high or very high understanding of what a refugee is from 6 to 7. Also showed that after the presentation, all students at least had a moderate understanding of the differences between refugees, asylum seekers, and immigrants. Regarding comfort level with explaining the application process for a refugee, all but one student said they had at least a moderate comfort level with doing so. Regarding comfort level and learning how to help refugees, after the post survey, all but one student stated that they had at least a moderate understanding of doing so. Regarding comfort level with knowing some of the challenges that refugees face, all but two students stated they had a high or very high comfort level with knowing some of the challenges that refugees. So an indirect impact of my project is that some students might take action to help refugees. This could include engaging in advocacy activities for refugees, which could include writing letters to representatives in Congress advocating for refugee resettlement and encouraging universities to offer refugee scholarships. Students may also make efforts to educate others about refugees and the challenges that they face. They may also want to volunteer at various organizations that provide services to refugees. So some of the activities that a student can help out with when they're volunteering can include driving clients to medical appointments or ELS or English as a second language class. So a long-term impact of this project is to help services at Samaritas be strong. So services have taken a significant hit recently with cuts from the federal government. As a result, some services have been or will be going away. The hope is with bringing awareness about refugees, more efforts will be made to ensure these services will stay should remain strong for many years to come. Also, the hope is to increase the number of volunteers in the long run. Despite some of the services going away, there still is and will be a need for volunteers. The hope is that some of the students will volunteer and maybe get others they know to volunteer, helping to increase the number of volunteers long term. What was learned was that at least half of the students beforehand had at best a moderate understanding of what a refugee was. Afterwards, most of the students rather, had at least a high understanding, showing that the presentation was effective in explaining what a refugee was, helping me to learn that I was effective in explaining what a refugee was. I also learned that I was effective in explaining the challenges that refugees face, as most of the students beforehand had at least a moderate understanding of the challenges that refugees face, but most had at least a high understanding after the presentation. So the plan changed a little bit throughout the project. The plan for this project all along was to bring awareness to the challenges that refugees face. However, this involved a bit throughout my project. I later added some details to my presentation, like describing what a refugee is, differences between immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, the application process for a refugee, services provided to refugees after entering the United States, discrimination that refugees might face, some statistics about refugees, reasons to help refugees, and ways to help refugees. Limitations for my project include the fact that this project was only given to one class. It was a challenge to find a class to give my presentation to, given that many college classes have tight schedules and may have had a hard time fitting into their class a presentation like mine. Another limitation is the fact that the class size I presented to was only about 10 students. This is not a major size of students, so it might make it difficult to increase the number of volunteers at Samaritas over the long haul. Also, the presentation ultimately did not include any personalized stories about refugees. Doing so may have ultimately enhanced my presentation and helped to explain refugees better. So recommendations for the future include presenting to more classes. Doing so would have helped to educate more people about refugees and the challenges they face. This may have been hard given how many college classes have tight schedules. Maybe doing a public forum with college students at a designated location would be helpful in doing a project like this in the future. Another recommendation would be to present to other members of the public besides college students. Doing so would have considered other members of the public and helped to increase their awareness about refugees and the challenges they face. And here are some of my references. Thank you for taking the time to listen.